And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another brand new episode of the Ultimate Cloud Learning Show by K21 Academy. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are safe and sound as well. Make sure you wear the mask. I think if you are currently living in India, you already have gotten used to the ringtone by the government of India already. So I hope you guys are staying safe on that part. And my name is Shivanshan Thakur. If you don't know me already, I'm a community manager associate at K21 Academy. And today I've got an incredible guest here, somebody who has multiple and not just multiple, I would say decades of experience in the amazing domain of cloud. So if you are somebody who is either starting out, experienced professional, this is the session for you. Anybody who is interested should come and be ready with the questions, because as always we are going to have a dedicated section for that as well. So make sure you are putting all the questions in the chat window. I'll be picking them up one by one. So just to give you guys a little brief introduction, today we have with us Mr. Subhasish Ghosh. He's got 33 Microsoft certification, 176 in total. And yes, I am not kidding about the number. That is the number of the amount of certification
Yeah,
that Sir has. Apart from that, he's currently working as a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft and had quite a career both in terms of education and in terms of different job roles as well. So welcome, sir, again to the Ultimate Cloud Learning Show by K21 Academy.
hey, hi, Shivansh. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate.
Thank you very much, sir, for accepting the invite. I personally have went through your entire profile, and I was really excited to have you here as well, because the amount of experience that you had, and especially the unorthodox career decisions that you have took, that have
Right.
played out pretty greatly in your career, as we can see right now as well. And especially your the influencer role that you also play in the cloud domain as a whole, what we like to call as cloud influencers as well. So I'm really excited to have you here. So again, thank you very much. I'll start with the very question. We'll start from the very start of your career as well.
Right.
So like I just mentioned, you have made some non-stereotypical career decisions in your life.
Right.
You did MSc in sociology after doing bachelor's in technology and engineering, and you're doing pretty well in your career. So how did that happen? Because usually a very obvious career choice would be to go for an MBA rather than MSc in sociology. So tell us a little about that as well.
Yeah, good question. So, see, I currently am working as a cloud solution architect. Focusing on data and analytics with the Microsoft enterprise commercial segment. So we have within that a segment basically called customer success unit,
Yeah.
technology team. But I dedicatedly work for one of our large global strategic accounts within Microsoft. Now,
Mm-hmm.
having said that, this may sound that this is of course a pure hands-on technical role, but essentially it boils down to consulting,
Yeah.
because we work with our customers, understand their business issues, problems, challenges. How do you articulate that into terms of technology, understanding the gap, and then eventually architecting a solution, in most cases the complex, it satisfies the need. So eventually it boils down to a culmination. If you see people, business and tech, so
Mm-hmm.
often people, just focus on the tech aspect of cloud architecture, but it's not. I always stress that when I speak to people, one on one, even when the people get in touch. So this, was very clear to me from the very beginning, and also some of my cousins and family members helped me that if you eventually want to get into an amalgamation role where you have tech, but then also you have the
Mm-hmm.
people business aspect of it, it's always the best. So
Okay.
once I finished, and of course I did have a very strong background in programming. Initially, I was an MCSD, MCSC when I was like
Yeah.
19, passing out high school. But when I did
Mm-hmm.
engineering, but then I always knew that either I need to do an MBA or a humanities course, so that I have
Mm-hmm.
that aspect of people, sorted out as well. So when I did my masters in UK, it really helped me because I picked up, political science, sociology, and I studied basically macroeconomics of aging societies. That's basically
Mm-hmm.
insurance policies and definitions. So the network of people that it played a very vital role. Now when I look back, I can join the dots. At that time, maybe I was not looking so far ahead that I would work for Microsoft someday, to be very honest. But
Mm-hmm.
I made this decision very consciously that eventually maybe again I'll enter into a consulting field, and then after a 5 or 10 year gap, then once I built up my good experience, I would do a proper MBA in tech or MBA in cutting business, international business, and all of that. So this little of prejudgment call I took when studying in my, let's say, bachelor's itself. So, but yeah, but
Okay.
it has played out very well for me. I see absolutely yes, because in the role currently I am in, then people's, let's say, relationships,
Mm-hmm.
businesses play a vital role in the tech aspect. Architecture is not just about defining the tech aspects of it.
Okay. So, while you were doing sociology, did it
Correct.
occur to you that you might actually want to do a complete, job role shift or career shift, or was it very straight from the point that this is just going to be an additional skill to my already elaborative tech resume or tech planning that I've did in
Oh,
terms of that?
for me, it was crystal clear because when I did my master's, right, like for example, I studied at St. Cross College, Oxford. So there you have a
Okay.
1 year MSc, then you have a
Uh-huh.
2 year MPhil. So usually the MPhil students enter into PhD. They become the
Okay.
doctorate of science and they go into
Yeah.
pure
Yeah.
academic roles. But I knew it
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning that I'm not cut out or I do not have career aspirations to be a PhD, be a Amartya Sen or be a
Yeah.
Manmohan Singh. I mean, those are not my career choices. So I that's
Mm-hmm.
why restricted myself only to a 1 year MSc. This was a very conscious
Okay.
decision. Almost of my friends or batchmates in Oxford, they mostly, I think less than 5% only dropped out after MSc. Most people go on to do
Mm-hmm.
MPhil, then a DPhil because it's
Yeah.
the best classical university on earth, right? I mean, it doesn't get better
Definitely.
than that. So, but I knew that no, I mean, this will give me an added advantage. But once I pass out, I work for a few years, I will change my complete, setup and move into tech field. Because see,
Yeah.
eventually I had a very strong databases background, network engineering background. I did my bachelor's all thesis in operating systems. I was very hands-on on Linux programming by the time I was about 18, 19. So I knew that my career field is set in IT, but
Yeah.
that little amalgamation of business, people, all of that economics I need to know, and that has really helped me actually right now when I look back.
That's great. That's great. So moving on to the next part, you have done quite a lot of certification, just like I mentioned, and 33 just being of the Microsoft Azure, which in itself
Correct.
is quite a huge number as of such. So what was the reason behind it? And even if you would suggest someone who is just a beginner out of college or maybe while in college, what do you think these certifications play a role in that person's career while they're just building out or starting out their career as of
Correct.
such?
See, they definitely play a very, very, very vital role. I'll be very honest with you.
Yeah.
And every person, individual person, if I must have spoken to, let's say, what 100 people on the phone who have contacted me via LinkedIn, which people
Mm-hmm.
usually always do. And, I always, advise them, please take up courses. Don't think about somebody paying for it, whether you will get reimbursed for it or not. Those are secondary points because
Yeah.
for me, three things are very vital. If you are ever interviewing for a company like Microsoft, the Amazons, the Googles of the world,
Yeah.
first thing, without taking any name or be specific of a company, they want to see whether this person has a growth mindset or not.
Okay.
The easiest, and how do you define growth mindset? It's not that somebody is just learning for the sake of learning, or it's not that somebody is reimbursing so you're learning, but he
Mm-hmm.
has an internal or she has an internal drive to keep you know being better. If you did something yesterday which you feel is excellent, can you better it? So that ability to challenge one's own self is a growth mindset, that you tell yourself that you are not the best. Now that only comes when you are continuously learning, otherwise you cannot bring value to the table. And I do not need to tell this, on cloud this is the most applicable, because on cloud, what things I worked on, let's go back like 3 years back, most of the
Yeah.
tech don't exist. 2 years back, what I worked for, even within Microsoft, half of the services have changed. What
Yeah.
I worked 2 weeks back, there are new updates to those services. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it automatically ties up you to be at the top of your game. And if you
Mm-hmm.
eventually want to get into a very good company, the top three cloud providers,
Yeah.
and then within those, like getting inside is the easiest part. How do you then
Mm-hmm.
better yourself, win awards, really be in front of the customer, driving million, billion-dollar deals? You cannot do that unless on every conversation you bring value. Now, big question comes up: how do you bring value? I mean, it can't drop from heaven, right? You need to build it internally. So
Yeah.
for me, I found out that doing courses, like I always tell people, like K21 Academy or like Udemy, or like I myself have done hundreds of dozens of courses from a plural site. I
Mm-hmm.
did a lot of paid courses from O'Reilly, and I always tell this to people. I did all of this when I was not at Microsoft. So I
Yeah.
paid from my pocket. Today, my
Hmm.
Microsoft exams are free. When I joined Microsoft, none of the exams were free, but I still paid for it myself. So
Yeah.
that's so in the interview, in fact, I was asked this question that you already have so many. I said, yeah, I'm working for Oracle because I moved from Oracle to Microsoft, but I still
Yeah.
keep on learning, right? Because I was prepared. So that is very, very important. And I tell this to people, right? So if you really want to become a good solutions architect, then eventually build on that and become an excellent one and then really make an impact. You have to keep learning. And for me now, there people, you can debate that there are multiple ways to learn. For me, it
Yeah.
has always been doing courses, training yourself, doing a lot of hands on, and then certifying yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. Definitely. I'd add on one part of that as well, that we at K21 Academy also promotes that whatever certifications, whether it's Microsoft Azure, AWS, or whatever it is a type of investment that you're
Correct.
putting in towards your career that eventually is going to cash out.
That's
So
200%. Absolutely agree.
definitely. You, since you have done quite a lot of certifications in probably all the different domains, what would be the top three Microsoft Azure certifications that you would list out for someone who is at beginner level, for someone who is maybe at a intermediate level?
Uh,
Sorry.
yeah, so of course, this answer will vary from people to people, right? Their choices, because we have role based certifications, we call it,
Yeah.
right? But eventually, if somebody is starting out, I always advise people get first hands on first get an Azure subscription account, get good hands on the admin role. That's the
Yeah.
stepping stone to other roles. So I think AZ 103 was there, now it's AZ 104. That is fundamental. Once you have done that, you should move to 303 and 304. That's basically the architect exam. Now,
Hmm.
what I advise people is once you have attained the 303, 304, give
Yeah.
it some time, maybe a year,
Okay.
then gauge out your own interest areas where you really want to specialize in.
Okay.
Now, there's a debate point here which often people have in their mind that, I have done a couple of certifications, but I'm not very clear on my career path.
Yeah.
That's the most common question that I get when people connect me via LinkedIn. So, what I advise people is, see, there is no one to guide you because your unique case will be unique. You may have
Yeah.
choices or passions which you only yourself know, right? So, but
Okay.
then you need to judge it out. Like I speak to a lot of people who are very passionate about security.
Yeah.
And then eventually you should mold yourself to do AZ 500 or start with the domain administration, then move into architect, then into security. I chose for myself that I really want to specialize in databases. Now, for that,
Yeah.
I need a hands-on experience on DP203. That's basically we had those days 200 to 201. One was a theoretical exam, one was a lab-based exam for data engineer. Then I
Okay.
did DP300 because I came from a SQL background. Then I moved into a full-fledged, data architect role.
Okay.
So, you have to plan, chalk out. But if you say top three for me, it would be AZ 104, it would be AZ 303, 304. And then based on your role, you can pick up like 404, best for DevOps people. Or if you are a developer, then 203 is mandatory for you. Then I speak to a lot of people who really want to do, they come from SQL analytics background, they want to move into Power BI. You
Okay.
then have a full path chalked out. You should do DP 900, easy in the 900, then you should move into DA 100, and then possibly become a full-fledged Power BI developer. So that will depend on your role basis also, like what interests you.
Okay. I have to mention this point out as well, that I think it's quite amazing as of such that today, whatever career job role that you're planning to go, there are certifications which, kind of
Yeah,
help you trace out that entire path, a career path that you're
correct.
going with, beginner level, you're doing this, intermediate this, and expert level, that is the certification
Absolutely,
that going.
absolutely, absolutely. And you
And
should
these certifications.
actually chalk it out that way. That helps you actually.
Yeah.
Correct.
And these certifications will also, kind of act as a validation towards your skills as well, which I think is quite, kind of important while you're giving those interviews,
Correct.
because you'll only be able to clear this certifications, these high level certifications, if you have gotten the skills and knowledge as well, because all of
Correct.
them are practical these days as well.
Correct. And also very importantly will be, which I always tell people that eventually that is just a stepping stone for the interview.
Yeah.
Irrespective of any company, you have to clear what 5, 6 technical rounds. So anyway,
Yeah.
they will judge you based on the certifications that you have passed. but questions eventually you need to answer. You need to do a lot of whiteboarding, correct? So that knowledge has to be there internally.
Definitely. So, so you yourself had almost like 11, around 15 plus years of experience in the IT industry as well. So, what
Correct.
would be the lessons that you have learned that you think the today's generation of the new, maybe cloud experts or whatever, different domains that they are coming, that they should know these things while they're starting out?
So there are multiple factors which eventually kind of somebody can learn, correct, to mold one's own career. If
Yeah.
I am being very very specific, I always feel that there are two skills which one should pick up when they're very young.
Yeah.
I picked them up, which helped me. I've also seen people who have not picked them up, though they are technically supreme, but their career growth has not been what their expectations were. So, what are
Okay.
those two core skill sets? One is very, very important. I mean, of course, I'm saying that, table stakes, like in poker, if you're playing, right, table stakes means the minimum. That is, of
Yeah.
course, you need to be technically good. But
Yeah.
along with that, you need to understand or spend time understanding the business context of business cases for which
Yeah.
that tech is applied, which I often see
Okay.
missing even in conversations with people who are very good. They quickly deep dive
Mm-hmm.
into solutions
Okay.
for a client or a project or for a
Mm-hmm.
customer. Tech pieces don't matter unless they all work together and you fulfill and solve a business problem.
Mm-hmm.
So always try, when you're working on a tech piece, question yourself that why can't this particular business problem be solved by XYZ WML services. That business context has to be crystal clear, and it's also one of the very vital points that good companies, when interviewing, judge while they're having the conversation with you.
Yeah.
So while they're having this conversation, you tell a lot of names of a lot of services. We'll do this, we'll do that, we'll architect it this way, architect that way. They always think, the interviewers, that you know are these services really satisfying the business case? Has this person understood the business aspect of it? So that is something, please, 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 you need to inculcate from the young, when you're at your growing stages, yourself. That is number one. And number two is also the ability to listen very carefully. We often miss that out, especially in cloud architecture. Let's say you are a data engineer, right? While you are speaking, let's say you are creating data pipelines. I'll give a very easy example. But you need to listen very carefully to the customer. That do they have tech skill sets internally which can, maybe absorb, let's say, creating data pipelines or ETL pipelines using open source. Or I have worked with many customers who don't. They want a drag and drop because they have analysts who are building these ETL pipelines. So that ability, but in case if you are going a complete coding way or a non-coded drag and drop way, your architecture would be very different. Your components would be very different. Your pricing would be different. Timelines would be different. So understanding business context, understanding the aspects of the business which are both functional, non-functional, then very important, listening carefully, jotting points down. These are like very important career growth. And then when you add all of the tech pieces to it, then of course you are absolutely set, because you have a business context, you have the functional, non-functional, you have listened carefully, you and then
Yeah.
eventually have a tech solution. So I would suggest these are all which one needs to inculcate when they are growing, working, and growing the steps of a career ladder.
Okay, that's. I mean, I 100% agree. Especially like something that I've also personally faced in an interview as well. The first point that you mentioned, like I was listing out the things that we can change and all of that stuff, and the point blank question that was asked from the interviewer was, how is it going to improve our business in terms of the revenue and how the growth is
Correct.
going to be projected over the years? You can, put in 10 things to play, but what are the
Correct.
results going to be that you have project, kind of have projections in your head? So you're 100% right on that. But that's something that I personally believe that a lot of tech people kind of miss out as well, because they, just like you mentioned, they're so very well focused on their technical craft as of
Correct.
such, the coding supremacy, that they kind of miss out on that part as well. And there is a very, kind of stereotypical norm out there as well, that the tech people are not going to be good at business. You can tell them that,
Yeah.
okay, you need to be doing this and that, and they're going to be good at that only, which I think is definitely changing and transforming today, with a lot of different maybe online courses or the YouTube sources that are out there that are, trying to educate them on that part as well. And the new generation of coders are also, kind of becoming a lot more smarter and versatile in their terms of skill set as well.
200% agree, and also very important taking the names. So I can't comment on Amazon or Google. I will not. But even within an organization like Microsoft, if you really want to elevate yourself
Yeah.
in terms of work profile to the profiles that you really want to be the world class teams, they
Yeah.
will always, always, always judge you not on your tech, but both tech and the business aspect of it.
Okay.
So that's very important. So critical it is, right, to have both a balance of both for a architect, specifically as you elevate your career.
Definitely, definitely. So you have also you're currently working at as a cloud solution architect at one of the biggest, like it's the top three or top four companies in the world as of such, especially in terms of tech. So what would be your suggestion for someone who's just starting out their career as a solutions architect? They just got done with their Microsoft Azure solutions architect certification. What's the next step for them according to you? And how should they kind of plan out their own career path to have a very successful career out there?
So see, it's basically a combination of a couple of things. Like we mentioned a couple of values that they can build themselves, but you need to invest time, right, to have a growth mindset, to continuously learn. But if you kind of break them down into steps, what I tell people always is, you should first get a subscription, do a lot of hands-on, build a lot of projects. GitHub is the place where nowadays interviews take place. Gone are
Yeah.
those days for an architect where you have a long CV with a lot of things written. People tell, have you created something? Have you extended
Yes.
an API? Have you written an extension to some code that exists that can solve a business problem? If you have done any of this, you've already gone like one step ahead of a million people. Let me be honest. In case you are not able to do this, then best is to figure out, given your circumstances, where best do you stand. Now, I get a lot of this query from people who are from, let's call it tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. They may not have the ability to move immediately to Pune, to Bangalore, to Delhi, let's call it. So, what I
Yeah.
tell them, then let's do one thing. If you are starting out a career as a core developer,
Yeah.
pick a stack such that which will help you eventually move into open source or cloud development stack. So instead of choosing a pure C++, maybe specialize in Golang, maybe specialize in Java, maybe specialize in .NET, because these are the predominant force pushing all the clouds. So that's again a career choice, because after 2 years when you're in a tier 2 city, you move to tier 1, you're well placed because it's very easy to pick up cloud then.
Yeah.
Or there's another thing which I also tell people, let's say that you are right now stuck in a role where it's non cloud. That's the
Yeah.
most common question people say, that we are desperate to make a career change. We are not able to, nobody is guiding us. I always advise people, do one thing, do courses on the side, prepare your CV, do projects on the side, and then eventually move to a smaller, maybe a SaaS or a PaaS partner. So let's call it a consulting partner for Google, or a consulting partner for Microsoft, or consulting
Yeah.
partner for Amazon. How I built my career. Nobody in Microsoft knew my name 10 years back. I built my career by working with partners, getting hands on. Then you
Yeah.
make the next jump to one of the OEMs. It becomes very easy to articulate the projects you have worked on. So you have to plan this little bit of your career, but then this planning, has to be done deeply by asking questions. What are you good at? Because
Okay.
again, there is a question which comes up here. There's a lot of people are joining the cloud bandwagon because there's a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
But do you internally love DevOps or security, or do you love just core development? You don't want to move into core cloud. That's a question that you have to ask yourself that nobody can answer.
Yeah.
But if you aspire to become a cloud architect, the most important point is for the top three cloud vendors, that is Amazon, Microsoft, let's say Google.
Yeah.
At a senior level, they want to see the level of complexity you have handled and delivered in complex projects. Now, for a
Yeah.
fresher, it may be difficult to articulate that at the very first step, correct? Because even if you have 10 certifications, they will say, have you delivered a $10 million, $100 million, $1 billion project?
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So then what I have done in my career, I used to do a lot of GitHub projects on the side, even while working on non-focused technologies. I'll give a practical example from my career. So when I interviewed for Microsoft, the final stage when I was having a data science discussion, the person asked me, "So have you built anything using our what we call the AI ML studio?"
Yeah.
I quickly, so I did not have a conversation. I said, "Sir, then give me 1 minute. I'll quickly open my browser. I'll share
Yeah.
my window, of course." So I have prepared a, let's call it, for a given use case in a restaurant in the US, trying to
Yeah.
predict male versus female dress styles for an upper class to a middle lower class kind of a restaurant. And it's a
Yeah.
machine learning model which is not perfect. It's giving me a 60% accuracy, but I have built it. And the person
Yeah.
was wowed. He said, hang on, but you're working for Oracle. I said, yeah, but my Saturday, Sunday I invest in studying Microsoft.
Yeah.
That has a much more value than telling thousand things on the interview and saying that if given a chance I will do, wonders. Nobody believes that.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
you have to do hands on, implement it on GitHub. If given a scope, show, don't tell. That's the best way of building your own career, and you will be given chance. People will believe you, and the person, I'll be very honest to say, was wowed. So of course, I mean, I cleared all my rounds, and I sixth day I joined because I was prepared for it. So you have to prepare, you have to elevate yourself to the role that you want to be. No one will give you a chance to be elevated to. I mean, that's what I have learned from life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll just expand on that one little point that you also mentioned
Yeah,
initially as well, before as well. That I had a conversation with a lot of people around in the cloud industry out of such as well, and they clearly told me that Shivansh, today the interviews or the interviewers especially are not looking at your resume per se, but they're looking either
correct,
at your LinkedIn or your GitHub or all of the
correct.
online platforms, whether it's Kaggle and all of that stuff. People, they can reject you on the basis of what your Kaggle rank as well today. They
At
don't want to see your
200%
resume. As
absolutely
simple
correct.
as that.
Correct, absolutely correct.
Yep. You have been working in Microsoft for a decent bit now. So what do you think is the difference in an interview of a normal company and a company like Microsoft when they're maybe interviewing for the same job role as a cloud solutions architect?
See, the core difference that I see, or I would articulate now that I have worked for, what, around practically, more or less within Microsoft for 2.6 years and associated with Microsoft more than 10 years, as partner, and, really been and kind of worked on my multiple projects internally with senior folks, is some of the core values that define an organization. Now, they differ from org to org,
Yeah.
but I believe if you do an average across the top three companies or four companies in the world, there are some common properties that will stand out.
Yeah.
One core value that all of them will be looking is, are you self-driven and very self, kind of driven person who can take ownership of complex projects? Because in these large companies, there's nobody to kind of guide you every single day. You'll be given complex projects, you need to drive it end to end. So that
Yeah.
self-driven focus is very important. Second is customer focus. You talk about Microsoft, Amazon, Google, on top of the Oracle, they're very customer focused. So are you going the extra mile to deliver? That is again very, very critical for these companies. While having the conversation, they will try and figure this out. Third is, we already touched upon, which is very, very, very critical, is having a growth mindset. People
Yeah.
will ask you that, have you done courses on your own? Have you learned something? What additional courses have you done? What is something unrelated to your core work that you have learned in last 3 months? It's a flat question.
Okay.
Most people, absolutely. So most people founded there because they say, oh, hang on, but I've been so busy with my life. So that shows that, are you ready to challenge yourself? Because people often get very focused on your day-to-day work. And
Yeah.
then for Microsoft, one thing stands out, which I was asked in my final round, is something, we have a concept of diversity and inclusion. How
Okay.
well do you respect others? Are you an empathetic
Hmm.
person internally? If you have heard, our chairman and CEO Satya's interviews, like, he always talks about a word called empathy.
Yeah.
And if you have read his book, Hit Refresh, I always request people, please go and read that book. There, he himself told his story about where in the final round somebody asked him a question, that when, if you're walking down the street, you see a baby lying, right? What do you do? He had said, dial 911. But that's not the correct answer, right? The correct answer is pick up the baby. So being
Yeah.
empathetic is very, very core to these businesses. Because
Yeah.
if you're not empathetic, you do not understand the other person's perspective, you can never become a good IT person, or a developer, or at least an architect. Why? Because if I don't understand the other person's perspective, how am I going to architect a solution? So these core, I mean, growth mindset, self-driven, very important, customer focus. And then for me, diversity and inclusion is very important. You have to give people the ability to perform to the level they can, being able to voice their, concerns on the table. be respectful of others, irrespective of this situation, right? So these are some core values they always see. I mean, given that you have the tech chops and skills to pass the technical rounds, of course, that's given.
Okay, definitely. So, in a nutshell, the top three companies are looking way past than just the technical skills because they already have a lot of people, and they look for
Correct.
people who can fit into their own office culture as of such, the environment that they bring to the table as well.
200%. I mean, I think 500% I agree, because tech skills is the easiest to get, easiest to teach, and easiest to pick up. But these
Yeah,
five things which I mentioned, right, having a growth mindset, being inclusive in nature, respecting diversity, then having deep customer focus driven,
yeah.
these really, really come, and being a good leader, these all comes deep from within. There's no course to teach you this immediately, that tomorrow I get up, I'm very empathetic about other people. It doesn't come that way.
Okay, definitely, definitely. I believe a lot of people who are watching this are going to find that useful because I'm pretty sure there are tons of people on the internet who are talking about the technical skills and all of that part. But this is one topic that a lot of people don't touch upon because I have also seen people, there is Life at Google and all these YouTube channels where the company professionals themselves talk about it and they emphasize quite a lot that we also find or look for people who are having or possessing the same culture qualities that we are also
Correct.
trying to develop and maintain at our organization as such as well. So
Two,
100% agree with
absolutely agree. Absolutely
agree
agree.
on that part. So, guys who are watching this, maybe if you have joined later, guys, if you guys have any questions for sir, please do put them in the chat window. I'll be picking them up just as we move on to the, maybe at the end of the session. So don't worry about that. Just put up your questions. I'll pick them up. So, sir, we have been touching this topic maybe very slightly throughout a few questions now, but let's come to this topic because I'm pretty sure a lot of people would like to know about that as well. So, what was your entire interview experience like at Microsoft, and how did that entire shift happen? Because a lot of people in general, especially, and I'm definitely sure a lot of people would agree with me as well, Oracle is one of the top 10 companies in the world as well. A lot of people are going to stop kind of hustling or trying to
Correct.
progress on that part at Oracle as well. So how did that happen where you kind of shifted that to Microsoft, and what was the entire journey at Microsoft as well?
So see, my Oracle interview was very strange. So I was already, working for a couple of AWS and Azure partners.
Yeah.
This was 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. So
Okay.
one day I was,
And that was
standing.
consulting.
Yeah. So we were purely consulting. I was doing architecting and also handholding large projects. And
Okay.
2016, I basically got a call from one of the very senior vice presidents based in Singapore. And I
Yeah.
thought the person has totally made a mistake. So when he started speaking with me, he said, "We have gone through your entire profile on LinkedIn, and this is real story, 200% real."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay." So he said, "No, but I am a very senior person. I mean, within Oracle, I live in Singapore. I'm an SVP. There are
Yeah.
26 countries under me. So
Yeah.
we read one of your blog posts which you have recently written, and by the way, that blog post is one of the most viral blog posts which I'd ever written. It is, how do
Okay.
you kind of, if you're a pure sales or tech sales, what are the
Yeah.
mistakes that often people do, and how should you prevent doing them?" That was the article.
Okay.
They said
Okay.
somebody in Oracle had read that and had forwarded it to me. So we are hiring right now for something called Oracle Cloud, which will come in next year. Would you be
Okay.
interested to join the team?
With
So I
that.
was like, no, but I think you made a mistake, because I mainly work on AWS and Azure. I have zero knowledge of Oracle. I just know, and
Yeah.
I told the person like this, I basically know five things about Oracle: that it's spelled Oracle, Larry Ellison, it's a red badge, a database, and all of that. I mean, I think you made a mistake somewhere. He said, no, no, we don't make mistakes. Why don't you go to the Oracle India office, which is, in PTP, Prestige Tech Park? So I met
Yeah.
one of the senior VPs there, who is right now in Google, as it so happens. So
Yeah.
I cleared six technical rounds in one day, from 10
Yeah.
o'clock to 5 o'clock. They offered me a letter at 5 o'clock, so I joined the next day only.
Damn.
So I had no waiting period, nothing. And in Microsoft also, it happened the same thing. I got a call from someone senior at Microsoft who knew me like many years. And they said, now you have finished like around 2.93 years in Oracle. We are hiring for a role in Microsoft, which we feel is a perfect fit for you. It's a cloud solution architect, data and AI role, but you'll
Yeah.
be handholding 600 to 1,000 customers. You'll be only one of two architects pan India for SMCC segment. Would you like to apply? So I cleared six rounds in 5 days. Seventh day, I was given the offer letter. I joined and I moved to Gurgaon.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't think I need to mention it out loud, but I think you know you make it when companies like Microsoft come knocking at your door trying to hire you, right?
Yeah. So definitely, but you need to have that expertise, skill set, and also very important the networking, which is some aspect of it people usually are not very good at. When I speak to
Yeah,
people one on one, they are introverts. But if
yeah,
you really do some great work, you need to write. You need to write blog posts. You need to have a
yeah.
technical channel, or maybe have GitHub projects. Push them, participate in events. I personally know fabulous technical people who don't do that. But all of this adds up to your persona. So when someone's hiring you, they 100% will look at all aspects of you, not just how beautiful you write code. So these aspects are very important.
I don't know whether so you're allowed to speak on that or not, and it's completely fine if you don't have to. But what were the 6 rounds at Microsoft were, if you can expand on that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you. So one was a screening phone round with the HR. They basically
Okay,
try and understand whether your career skills match with the role. So that's like a
okay,
screening first round. My second round was with a senior architect of the, let's call it one of the teams internally in Microsoft. That was a fantastic round. And I knew
okay,
that the person will go deep because he gave me an option that have you worked hands-on SQL Server? I said to a
yeah,
certain extent. So he said, what I see you are in Oracle. So let's talk about all of the HA concepts, resiliency concepts, replication concepts, and you answer them in terms of Oracle that you have worked on. So that
yeah,
was like a 45-minute deep dive into databases, SQL Server and Oracle Exadata and all of that I was working on. And the third round was again a technical round taken by another senior architect. There he went mostly on the infrastructure side of things. He wanted to check whether I know the basics of Azure or not. Again, a 45 minutes round. Then came a very awesome round. So that was taken by a very, very senior, let's call it from the Microsoft Technology Center, a very senior individual. He had gone deep into basically the data and analytics, big data patterns, architectures, and then AI. What AI have I worked on? Have I worked on ML Studio? Have I worked on machine learning, deep learning algorithms, and all of that? That was the one, two, three, fourth round. The
yeah.
fifth round was basically with a senior director, but this time it totally switched. It was a person from the sales excellence side, but was a
Okay,
senior director in Microsoft. That person basically wanted to judge, understand my business aspect, what kind of projects have I worked on. Because sometimes people inflate numbers, they say I've delivered $100 million project, but the
yeah,
important point is what was the percentage you worked on. They want to really justify and jot down that details. And the last sixth round was again with a senior director of the same org, but that was purely from like HR, but from diversity, inclusion. And I was asked very specific questions. Like I still remember it was like, because I was stumped a little bit, that what is your definition of diversity?
okay,
What is your definition of inclusion? If you can explain with some examples. I was asked these questions. Okay, show us a case where you did something which was against your principles, but you did it. But maybe how did you correct it later on? So questions like these were asked. So that was the sixth round. So I had like 6 rounds. Yeah.
okay. That's great. So so I'm gonna expand a little because we have talked about data engineer specifically in this
Correct.
kind of talk show series as well. So you have yourself cleared as a data engineer certification, that's DP 2 or 3, like we had discussed
Correct.
earlier as well. So if someone is preparing, for as a data engineer, what are those services that they should master to have a high probability in not only clearing the certification as well, to be able to get a job as well? And keeping that in mind, it's also a generalized question for all the different certifications out there, that even after once you're done with the certification, what you can do to maybe highlight that in
Mm.
a particular interview for the job role that you're applying for.
Yeah. So for me, whenever somebody says the term data, even in the largest of data projects, 60% of the complexity is often in the ETL pipelines. How do you
Okay,
move the existing data to the cloud? That's the most part of the complexity. So somebody
okay,
who is really wanting to become a world-class data engineer, or later elevate to a data architect, or later become like myself, a data analytics architect,
yeah,
your conceptual understanding of how to create ETL pipelines or ELT pipelines based on the use case. Is it batch versus transactional or versus real time, or micro batch can work?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a what do you call it, the butterfly architecture, kappa architecture? By the way, these are also interview questions which I was asked in my fourth round. All of these what I covered right now, that
Okay.
this is in the use case. How do you define a architecture which is kappa? How do you make it a butterfly architecture? These concepts have to be known extremely well. And the
Okay.
person then, now I have met two kind of data engineers who are extremely good in coding. So they write ETL pipelines using code, like using something like Azure Databricks, and they use Scala or Python to write in a notebook and
Okay.
push the pipelines. But I've also met data engineers who in projects say, we try and stay away from code.
Okay.
Our folks mostly are drag and drop guys. So they absolutely master the concepts of EDF. It's Azure Data Factory.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
from my perspective, for becoming a really wholesome data engineer, you need to know both. You need to
Okay.
have some basics of using notebooks, use Python or Scala basically, or Java via Databricks to create the pipelines. You should also definitely know the ADF aspect of it and go deep. Different kind of projects you should be able to handle. Now, the second part of it, of the data engineering, is also the level of transformation you need to do for a given project. I've seen people being able to easily pull data which is in ORC or standard Avro format, or
Yeah.
and then push it and then do ETL on the fly. But if you give a little bit tweak on the use case, like let's say I am pulling data from a PBCS. What is PBCS? It's Oracle's product. It's basically a planning and budgeting service, I think it's called. And now they come in their own dimensional data reports models. It's very difficult to do ETL out of it. So
Yeah.
such projects, you need to have little bit hands-on experience on. These will elevate you to the next level. Once the ETL part of it is good, and you have a little bit mandatory experience right now, what I say, I write on LinkedIn also quite a lot, that Databricks is a must-have knowledge right now.
Yeah.
You cannot go away without knowing Spark. If you are in
Okay.
data engineering right now without knowing Spark, your career will be very limited. Because if you go pure Databricks path, or you go even Synapse path, we have Apache Spark pools in data in basically Synapse, which comes in use for different kind of real time use cases, micro batch use cases, and so on. So that knowledge has to be there, right? I mean, these two things, ETL and knowing Spark. Third, which is not mandatory, but again, if you want to elevate from a data engineer to a data architect someday, is you need to have some level of understanding of data stores.
Okay.
Core SQL versus a NoSQL. When should you go for a Mongo API versus a Cassandra? When is Hive a good option? When should I move all of these and go to Cosmos DB? Why? Because eventually the question comes up, if you're a good data engineer, that is, at large organizations, I have met, by the way, data engineers who say we only focus on data pipelines. Now, that is not a wrong thing to do, because that's the starting point, but then eventually you can't get stuck in your career there. You have to elevate to the next level, right? Then you need to have a more higher view. So
Yeah.
think of it from a house. Like, first step is the data pipeline, second stage is the layers, third is the transformation, then the data stores. And if you have end to end, if you're an architect, you need to know all of these patterns, by heart. By looking at a use case, you should be able to tell the pattern. So these are all core skills which are tested in DP. I did 200 and 201. Now it's the T203, right? Exam.
Yeah.
They're all
Okay.
services, right, Joe?
Okay, okay. I mean, that's a great answer. I believe a lot of people who had this question, who had asked us in the comment section as well. I hope your answer is answered. I don't know that. I don't know how to answer that better, to be honest. Oh, okay. So we got a question in the comment section as well. Something that you just mentioned in your answer. So I'll pick that one up. So Dipanshu Singh asks, uh, how to learn Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks. Just like you mentioned, it's
Correct.
very highly important as well. So what's the right process, or what's the right pathway to kind of learning it and maybe
See, data
practicing it as well?
factory. See, data factory is very easy. Correct. It's a drag and a drop. So make an Azure subscription, build a couple of services as a source, and then what I often used to show demos in my earlier days in Microsoft, when it
Yeah.
has just come out. The people used to say in larger companies, like we used to give demos to the GSIs, the global SIs, that how do you transform data from an ADLS Gen 2 to a Databricks maybe, or from an SAP ECC6 or a SAP HANA into an ADLS Gen 2. Maybe build your own pipelines, you'll get hands-on experience. That's the best way to learn. Or maybe doing a course at K21, or I have done myself a lot of courses by learning from Udemy Plural site. Definitely helps. Now, Databricks is a different mindset altogether, because in Databricks, you just get a notebook. Now you need to
Right.
write code there. There's nothing to drag drop. So fundamental is then you need to know a little bit of Python or Scala. It does support Java, jars also, but most people I used to code in Python. So which also again takes one step back. I learned Python myself, though I came from a .NET and a Java background. Because why? Because I really knew I wanted to leverage Databricks. Databricks supports multiple languages, but mostly people use Scala and Python. So that's very good. But then how I see, and I'll be very honest to the Pangshu's question, if you just want to become a data engineer with ETL focus, maybe Data Factory suffices. But if you want to elevate your career to the next level, then knowing Databricks is mandatory, mandatory, mandatory. Why? Because in Azure Databricks, you are not anymore a data engineer. In Databricks, you can create projects. You embed, cognitive service APIs. You can elevate yourself to a data AI, let's call it an engineer. You can learn ML, models, deep learning models. You can write models. You can, add GPU clusters. You can elevate yourself even to a hands-on, I wouldn't call it hardcore data scientist, but an AI practitioner, AI modeler. So you can elevate your career if you really know Databricks very well. And I personally have worked with loads of customers who are big, big, big on Databricks. So ADF is purely for ETL, but Databricks is not. It's a full end-to-end lot of things, right?
Okay, great. So, guys, we are almost at the end of this session. So, guys, if you have any questions, put them down below as soon as possible, because we'll be ending this session soon. And I certainly believe like this is the right time to ask any questions if you have any. So you have worked for both Microsoft and Oracle. You're currently working with Microsoft as OEMs and consulting partners for all the four major cloud providers: that's
Correct.
AWS, Azure, GCP, and Oracle. So, what do you think the future holds for cloud? Like in the initial time before the live as well, we were talking about. You told me that it's gonna grow by twice or thrice in the future. But
Correct.
how is it going to achieve that level, and how people can actually cash out that? Because if it's growing, there's going to be an increased job growth as well. So how do you think? How do you look at that?
So see, I always go by Gartner and other numbers.
Sorry.
If you see Gartner and all the top, like let's say 10 research reports, so there is a term called CAGR, we call it, right? The compound annual growth rate. So if I combine SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS and the hybrid cloud as a service together, the CAGR is basically always between 19 to 20 to 21%. That's annual growth rate. That's massive. Nothing grows so fast. So when you say growth, means it will also impact our social lives. Once IPv6 becomes standard, your refrigerators, houses, everything you can control via mobile. That's already become a reality.
Yeah.
IoT will massively boom. If the complex CAGR is at 20%, I think these individual things like security as a service, hybrid cloud as a service, storage as a service, IoT as a service, these will be 10 times compound rate, which also means, if I boil down to, there will be a massive need of highly skilled people. It could be developers, administrators, it could be pure cloud engineers, security. There's a millions of jobs for security if you only specialize in that. And then for large vendors, they will always be hiring very good architects who have that, going back to the first question, business mind to understand the use case and then architect complex solutions. So your hands will be full if you can really leverage this. I think this is the best time to leverage it. Then again, depends on your own growth aspirations, how driven you are, how much of a growth mindset you have, and continuously learn. So I'm very hopeful. In very short one line, if I say, I mean, growth will be substantially higher, and COVID has accelerated that. By the way, at least a few years, like 10 years, has got accelerated in last 2 3 years. So it will get more accelerated in the future.
Okay, that's amazing. So we just got two more questions. I'll just pick them up and then we're gonna close it. So, one of them is, you did a lot of certifications, and I'm sure there would be some times where you might have given a certification exam and you didn't clear it in the first attempt. That
Correct.
happens with a lot of people, and that's very understandable as well. So, at that time, how do you deal with that disappointment, and how do you bounce back on that part?
So see,
Sorry.
how I see it, again, good question. How I see it is, it's not end of the story, because
Yeah.
even the best of people have bad days, and then you have not failed. It's basically the exam has come such a way that you couldn't answer them correctly, so you always have a second day.
Yeah.
AZ204 right now, it's previously it was AZ201, 203, that is the developer exam. It's a tough
Yeah.
exam, it's a practical exam. I failed twice, I still took it the third time.
Yeah.
DA100 is a tough exam. I failed thrice. I passed it on the fourth. I mean, there's no hard, fast rule there. But what I say is that, again, which I tell people is you have to have a critical, analytical mindset for passing an exam. So when I speak with people, they mix up two things, and I'll mention them. They feel that adequate knowledge they don't have, that's why they have not passed the exam, which is wrong. Passing an exam is purely satisfying the 700 pass marks to be able to pass.
Yeah.
Knowledge is eternal. You have to keep growing, bettering on it. So having that analytical mindset that I need strategy, I need a plan, I need to have a study schedule to clear that minimum 700 is the core that is needed. I always differentiate that very well in my mind. So that is what always I advise people when they get in touch and say, we tried clearing this exam, we couldn't. I said, have you gone back and analyzed which are the parts you are weak at? You have to be critical yourself. You can't just take the number and say, I'll pass it on the next try. You will come back with the same number. For the ones which I have failed, I sit down and jot down the points. I go back and do Microsoft Learn, study. I do labs. I have taken dozens of Udemy plural site courses. I invest time in them. I do hands-on. Then I sit after again a while. I have failed AZ203 and DA100 like 3 4 times, but I kept on trying. I mean, that you have to clear, right? You have to have that intensity.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I believe a lot of people who maybe have failed their certification exams are definitely going to kind of get a boost through that. So, guys, the last very question that we have, it's kind of similar. Arvind, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Arvinda or Arvind, that I'm gonna ask you, sir, a similar question. So, sir, when you look at a question certification exam, just like you mentioned, it has both the theory and the hands-on labs or the
Correct.
practicals as well. So, how do you compare the importance and how do you kind of value them or measure them while you're preparing for that certification exam?
Yeah, so see, and this is also related to Arvind's question, like how do you make time?
Yeah,
Now, like a month back, I had written a LinkedIn post, and it's actually reality. That is basically, and I think Shubhra also has asked the same question: how do you manage time? So I am extremely, extremely, extremely clinical when it comes to managing time,
yeah,
because I go out, I party, I travel the world, but I still do all of these. And work in Microsoft is very hectic. And I say
yeah,
hectic means from 10 o'clock, I have had days when 2 o'clock, I have gone to sleep. There were so many meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, so what I do is I have a daily schedule of getting up in the morning and investing 1 hour. I have a blocked out output Outlook calendar which I follow. Like before the world gets up, I do 1 hour of proper study or some hands-on of like right now I'm preparing mentally for DP 420, which is the Cosmos DB exam. So I write code, I execute, I check the errors because your mind is fresh and clear in the morning. And then usually in the night before going to bed, like let's say if my day ends at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, usually I have calls till 10. I also post dinner, find some time out basically to do some writing, not reading, because you are
Yeah.
tired than mind, right? So basically some revising some things or basically checking some why things are not working properly. So every day at least I try to take out 2 hours. So 5 into 2, 10. Saturday, Sunday, which I had written on my LinkedIn, is I alternate. If on Saturday mornings or the evenings I am dedicating some time, then Sunday I party out or go out, or vice versa. If I'm really going out on Saturday or something like that, Sunday I find some time during the daytime or the evening, a 4 hour block or a 3 hour block to invest time. And I do this full planning in Outlook, like basically, full month in advance. So I block out days proper with a yellow so that they are also visible in my calendar, and I stick to it like hardcore as a discipline, because the renewals also there, right? I recently passed 6 renewals because just passing is not important. You need to give the renewal exams also
Yeah,
every year. So I
yeah,
make
yeah,
a schedule
definitely.
for that. And then third thing which I do, which is also related to the last question, that is, I have an Excel sheet where I put numbers of dates for the exam I'll take and then reverse engineer it. So let's say
Okay.
I have already put down some dates for DP 420. Even if I don't sit the exam on that day, let's say it's 15th of Feb, let's assume, I push the 15th Feb to March. which I reverse my calendar and study so that I'm prepared with 90% of the content to pass that exam. It's going to be a difficult exam, I know, because it's a specialty exam. At least I'm 70%, 80% there of that 90% that I need to pass. So I reverse engineer my days with the date. I then push the dates around, but I start with that. So, I'm very disciplined when it comes to that.
Definitely, definitely, and I believe that kind of reflects in your entire career journey and the decisions that you've took as well. Every decision, just like you mentioned, is a very calculated decision that you have taken, like maybe 2 or 3 years already in advance as to this is what I'm gonna do and this is what I'm gonna do as well.
Yeah, because the biggest mistake which I seen people, and when people connect with me one on one on LinkedIn, is they say we are preparing for 3 years, we are preparing for 2 years. That's wrong. It's like by the time 2 years in cloud means 20 years in retail, 20 years
Yeah,
in engineering. Because by the time you have, and then people get caught up, should I do AZ 203 or should I prepare for 204? That's an odd, bad question to ask. Prepare with a date in mind. Correct. Learning is eternal, but you need to pass that exam, right? So that requires a little bit of a clinical mindset. Don't prepare forever. If you're for 3 years preparing for AZ3 or 203, or let's call it 303, I think 90% of things have changed, right? So that is very important. Having a fixed date, then reverse engineer and take out 2 hours daily. That's enough. That's a lot of time.
definitely. I believe we just got a few questions, but I believe we are almost out of the time. So,
Yeah, no
sir,
worries.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I said no worries. Thank you. I mean, really appreciate.
Thank you very much, sir, again for joining in. Guys, I'm pretty sure, and I believe sir will agree with this as well. We've just scratched the surface as to the amount of
Yeah.
information and knowledge that sir has to share. So we'll probably have sir again on the show very soon. And all of the questions that you guys have will probably answer them in maybe the next session or so. Or maybe you can even put them down. We'll be posting this entire video on all the three platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So you can put them there and we can get those answered as well. So thank you very much again, sir. Any last parting advice that you'd like to leave us all with?
Yeah, just one line, that is, stay focused in life. There are a lot of returns on if you put your time and energy and investment in cloud. That is, shown by everyone, all the growth, major cloud providers. But make sure that you're a little disciplined and stick to your plans. It will give you returns. Believe me, it has given to me in my life, where I started my career or where I am today. It will definitely give you if you're a little focused and have a little bit of discipline. That's all.
Okay, that's great advice, I'd say. And this has been a very personal, learning kind of experience for me as well. And I hope the people who are watching here as well, they have the same as well. Guys, if you haven't followed sir on LinkedIn, what are you guys doing? Go right now and follow sir, Subhasish Ghosh sir on LinkedIn. Awesome content that's been there when I did my research as well. Even if you'll go to his profile, or probably it was the first LinkedIn profile when I tried to open one particular session, the entire subsection kind of opened up with certification, whether it's education, whether it's bio as well. So guys, make sure you go and follow them. And if you haven't followed K21 Academy, make sure you do that as well. So every time we go live with these incredible shows and maybe free class as well, you get to know about that as well. Thank you very much, sir. Again, thank you everybody for
Thank you.
joining as well. Hope you
Thanks,
guys like
thanks,
this
thanks,
session.
thanks, Shivansh. Thanks, K21, and look forward definitely speaking in the future. Take care, everyone.
Definitely, sir.
Bye, bye.